Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast. Now, we're constantly looking at the data within this industry. What are people doing? What are people searching? Who's coming to the websites? What actions are they taking on the websites? What characteristics do these people that reach the website have? And one of the biggest lessons that we learned quite early on when we got involved in this industry and started running these kind of big data pieces across our members' websites is there's a big misconception. And that misconception that we hear often is either my patients don't have the internet, my patients are all over the age of 80, or they don't have cell phones, or just this belief that the websites that we need to build in this industry aren't that important. The text on them has to be huge because our patients have eyesight problems. And thirdly, the only reason people come to our website is to call us. So make sure the phone number is huge when they land on the page. And the piece of data that we quickly discovered is actually the much larger percentage of the people that come through to this website and the industry's websites are under the age of 65, with a large number of them being under the age of 45. And the question is, why is that going on? And it seems pretty clear when you think about it. The patient themselves is rarely the decision maker in who they choose to do business with. The biggest instigator in that process is the son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, niece, nephew, or loved one of the actual patient. And when you realize that, you realize this phenomenal opportunity that occurs. Because, for example, if my father was experiencing hearing challenges, the first point of call that I would have is to do my own research on what are the common signs, what does the process look like, how much would this cost to fix, what are the potential flaws. And the way I do that is by being a young man, and I suppose everybody in the world does now, is go onto Google and make that search. And that presents this phenomenal opportunity for content creation. Because right now, thousands upon thousands of people are searching for questions around what you do. It could be about first signs of hearing loss. It could be, what does this mean? It could be, how much are hearing aids? There's a whole number of common searches that we see. Yet hardly any of us really tap into this. What many do is use these regurgitated blog pieces, which are posted on multiple websites that have no value to Google whatsoever, but very few are doubling down and looking to be real content leaders. There's probably one person that jumps to mind that's dominated YouTube by doing this and been able to build a kind of endless stream of patient inquiries off the back of it. But there's so many phenomenal opportunities by being a great content marketer. Now, it might feel scary, it might feel big, you haven't got time for that, you're not a marketer. And the question is, how can you do this in an effective way without it being a sucker on your time? And that's where today's guest is really going to help. So we have the pleasure today of being joined by Melanie Deziel. Now, Melanie is the author of the Content Fuel Framework and is an award-winning content marketer. In this interview today, she's going to be sharing different ways that you can create powerful content and how you can come up with over 100 different content ideas in less than 30 minutes. But most importantly, she's going to be talking towards the hearing care industry. She's going to be understanding the challenges that we have. You'll hear our members on the call who will be pitching in questions. Phil will be interviewing on behalf of the hearing care industry. And together we create this perfect storm of really understanding how we as an industry can create powerful content that helps people and moves people to action. So without further ado, over to you, Phil.
Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the podcast for high-performing hearing care clinics that want to learn the strategies, ideas, and truths behind some of the smartest private practice clinics in the world. Now, time for your hosts, Phil M. Jones and Ollie Luke.
Is what we know we need to do here. And we have some of our Inner Circle members here from around the US. And Erica says she loves the tune. So Erica, thank you for that. Manny was not so happy to have the reggae pop summer vibe dashing out this morning. Says that this is nice and love for this to be able to be here. Melanie, thank you for carving some of the time out of your day. We're going to get straight into some stuff here today. And for those of you that don't know Melanie, then firstly, why are you here? because we told you enough about her before she showed up. But Melanie is founder of Story Fuel. Not only that, is author of the Content Fuel Framework, which is a stunning book that I've told many of you to rush out and go buy. Just hit us up in the chat, the comments, if you've had a chance to be able to explore Melanie's book. If you have so, say yes. Tell us some of the things that you liked about it. That would be useful. And if any of you don't yet know what it looks like, here it is. Look, in real time twice. Look how pretty it is. Look how pretty it is. So Melanie, tell us this. How did you get involved from a get-go of understanding that content was important and that storytelling was something that was a valuable way of being able to communicate to others?
I came to marketing quite by accident through, I think, a sneaky backdoor. I studied journalism, and so I've always believed in the power of storytelling. I've always been the kind of person to ask a lot of follow-up questions, and I take a lot of pride in sort of collecting information and giving it to others, and it's just something that's always kind of fed my soul. I'm definitely like a teacher by I don't know, by personality, I guess. And so I love that ability to become an instant expert on something by studying it really deeply and then getting to share the value that I learned with others. And so I saw that working in journalism. Obviously, we're very mission driven about trying to inform people, help them become better citizens, help them understand what's happening in their community. But I think there seemed to be a disconnect a little bit on the marketing side from what I saw. A lot of the marketing content tended to be very self-motivated. It was very sales-motivated. And as such, it was kind of missing its purpose of engaging the audience. So I'm always trying to see what can I take from that journalistic approach to apply to our marketing content, and see how we can kind of meet in the middle and create something that creates value for both sides.
Okay. We've seen a lot in the hearing care space where historically what people have chosen to market is product focused, feature and benefits, price-led incentives to be able to get people to capture the attention on that. Why do you have a feeling that that is not necessarily the right way of approaching a group full of people?
I find myself making a lot of analogies to just the way we live our lives as individuals, kind of take our marketing hats off for a second. And I think so much of the content we create, when it's very call to action strong without building a relationship first, comes across a little bit like kind of walking into a bar, which I know no one does this anymore, right, with COVID, but walking into a bar and just sort of proposing blindly to people and hoping that someone says yes, like, I'm really great, like, I'm wonderful, you should love me, you should date me, come home, And I think that we all know in life that building those relationships, it's more of a conversation first. So you need to ask questions, you need to listen, you need to provide value that focuses not on making you look good, but on helping them, on providing something that they need. And so when we apply that to our content strategy, it's the more educational content, the more informative content that often is a half step away from a product, or at least not making that direct call to action yet, that really does a good job of building that funnel toward the conversion without having to jump in straight away.
So where are there examples in your archives that you've seen people do this storytelling approach towards marketing well? Things that either we won't know that you can share with us, or maybe even more commonplace that we can perhaps unpack a little?
So a couple different examples that I like to turn to commonly, especially if you're new to this, if it's a little intimidating. I think the easiest place to sort of sprinkle in some storytelling is in your testimonial. So most of us understand the value of having third-party credibility, of having people who are, attesting to how wonderful our products and services are. Most often, though, that's in the form of, here's a quote, here's an attribution, their name or title or where they're from, and that's pretty much it. If we're lucky, we might put a photo in there. That's not a story, and it's really hard for people to relate to. I'm sure we've all had that feeling of seeing a testimonial like that and being like, I don't even know if Phil Jones is a real guy after all. Like, he could just be a stock photo with a name, right? So, we want to give people a clearer picture. So start with your testimonials. A lot of businesses, when they start out, will try to do a more narrative approach to those kinds of things. So instead of just asking for a quote, interview them, have a conversation, understand, well, what other choices were they considering? How did they make the choice to come here? What was at stake in this particular decision that they made to work with you, to buy your product, to engage you in their, in your services? And by having that deeper conversation, talking to other people in their lives. How did this impact their relationship with their partner, their relationship with their children, their success at work? Really get a bigger picture of the impact. That's going to be so much more compelling. It's going to be so much more trustworthy because there's more elements to it, and it gives people a chance to connect on a more human level. You know, when I see the little square of Phil M. Jones and his testimonial, I don't know his life. I don't know if he's similar to me. I don't know if we have shared experience, but when I hear about how it changed his impact with his relationship with his family, I can relate that to my own family relationships. When I hear about the benefits he's seen at work, I'd say, well, I'd like to perform better at work too. It gives me more points as a person to connect with, more opportunities to feel compelled by that story.
So we do a lot of this with our inner circle members, and Doug on our team is a journalist by trade and then has been interviewing many of our inner circles members, customers, to find out the exact things that you're talking about. But what are maybe some of the missing questions that we could have in place? What might be things that potential customers would be wanting to know that, yes, we can do bigger testimonials, yes, we can make more noise about it, but what might be some of the stuff that we can turn it from good to great just by asking better questions?
Yeah, so this is also a really good book I want to recommend, and I don't know if you've covered this before, but They Ask, You Answer by Marcus Sheridan, a friend of ours. One of the easiest ways to create content that you know your audience is going to care about is to create content that answers their questions. So Marcus talks a lot about that in his book, but one of the tools I recommend, if this is new for you guys, is to look at a tool called Answer the Public. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but
we shared this with a group a short while back as well, and we find it really useful. We draw a lot of content inspiration from it.
So many questions. That's a really good place to see what are the exact questions that your audience or a similar audience are asking, and then build your content in response to that. I think, individual challenges or purchase drives are going to drive what those questions might be. But I think a lot of people, particularly in this time, their questions are around uncertainty. So if you're looking for additional content that may help feed that, help them feel more comfortable, more safe. The data shows right now that people are still willing to make purchases during this time, but those are purchases that make them feel safe, comfortable, healthy, and happy. Like we're back to our core drives. Like we're back to our most base monkey brain drives right now. So any content that reassures them about things like payment plans, right? If they have financial concerns, about how it may interact with different other health issues or health problems they may have, they may be really down to those core fears. And so content that can allay those fears and answer those kinds of questions is going to be particularly helpful right now.
So one of the things that we've been preaching a lot right now is that content and marketing within the hearing care space should be split into three key areas. One of that is safety, touching on the whole piece that you're talking on there. Yep. The other is convenience, anything that's being done to show a level of convenience. And then the third factor is community, things to show that you care more about the very specific lane that you care about. If you're to stick on your think like a journalist hat, not understanding a great deal about the world of hearing care, thinking about those three buckets, what would you be approaching as a content story around this? How would you use the content fuel framework, thinking around those things about, maybe some unique ideas that we can do to help this group of people think differently, produce content differently, and for us to then help them produce better content as a result of these times, looking at those three buckets, combining it with your framework? So
for those of you who didn't read the book, this is really the framework in a nutshell, right? So we've got the various formats in which we bring our content to life are down the side here, things like writing, audio, infographic. And then across the top are the different focuses. What does our content focus on? What's it about? And so I think what we're talking about here is a conversation around the focuses. So give me those three buckets again so we can kind of go through some ideas for each.
So we've got safety, we've got convenience, and
convenience. Okay. So one of the focuses that I really like is data. And so I think that's sometimes an overlooked area. So when I think about convenience, I think if we can demonstrate with numbers, show, don't tell, how convenience is created with these products or these services, that's really one of the best ways to make that case. Because again, we can always say it's more convenient, it's very helpful. But the more we can demonstrate that with data, I think is going to be a really good way to prove out the value. Now, this is a different area, of course, but this is one of the tools that I love. I pay for a tool that helps me expand snippets of text. So I use a short phrase and it expands it into a whole sentence or a URL or an email. And it's expensive, but every single month they send me a report that says you saved 3 hours and 24 minutes by using this tool, because that's how much time you would have taken if you had to do this. So by showing me the data of how convenient it is, of what it's really saving me, it makes it so that I'm ready to make that investment every month again and again. And so look for those data points, those opportunities to say, this is time, or, where's the numbers? How can we dig into that? Is that spurring anything for you?
I think, like, even as we jam that out, right? Lots of people are doing curbside service right now, as opposed to inviting somebody to travel across town, or they're doing remote support, etc.
Yeah.
So I'd be now thinking that, okay, let's use that data focus. Is in the month of July, we saved our patients Z number of hours, X number of minutes, etc., as a result of them not having to risk leaving their house. Then what we're doing is using data to say we've got safety and we've got convenience combined.
Yes. Well, and what's really fun with data is to extrapolate. So when you think about, okay, we saved our clients this many minutes. Well, what could you do with those minutes? That's enough to watch all of Game of Thrones in a whole month. Or that's enough to, cook this particular souffle that has to take this long to marinate, right? You could home brew your own beer to keep you occupied through the pandemic, right? So how do you draw those equivalencies to other areas that are important? It's time spent with your children, right? That's, this many homework hours you can help with. So look for those other areas, especially around safety and community, that you can tie that into.
We can have real fun with that as well, right? For example, that now that we haven't got patients waiting aimlessly in a waiting room, we could take the time that's saved from there and then produce content about things that they could do from that time. So say, for example, that you do have a passion for baking in your brand, is that you can give, like, we've saved our patients on average 12 or 18 minutes in an appointment. Here are a series of activities you could complete in the 18 minutes saved, and then make that fun, drive that out through email newsletter, drive that out through social content.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all that comes from the data points, right? And so even that's a really timely one for right now, but you could even do that on your website somewhere with the cumulative totals. And I think those can be really beneficial content points as well. So talking about the total number of clients you've helped, the total number of items shipped, the total number of people on a web page or having read a piece of content, those kinds of things really can give more social proof.
No, I like that too. And one of the things that we do with all of our members is to try and normalize hearing loss, right? What everybody else looks to be able to do is to say, you've got hearing loss, you are broken. What we try to say is hearing loss is normal. It says that you've lived an abundant life and that you've experienced a lot, and some of these things have worn out. So even using data points to say how many people have been tested this week, or how many people have been tested this quarter, etc. What percentage of people over a certain age are found to have significant levels of loss, etc. These are strong points that we can use in content that are showcasing that somebody isn't broken.
One of the content formats that's coming to mind for me as well that may be really helpful for normalizing. In the book, I talk about tools, and I think tools are, oftentimes creating a tool can be incredibly helpful for helping your audience achieve something. And one of the tools that I've always appreciated in the sight care space is I personally have horrible eyesight. I wear very strong contact lenses, and if I didn't have them, Phil, I wouldn't even know who you were at this distance. It's not good. And there's a wonderful tool that I can use to show, for example, my partner to have an understanding of, hey, when my contacts are in, this is what I see like, so you can understand. It makes it easier for him to know that, hey, at night, I really need to be more clear if you've taken your contacts out. I can't gesture small, I need to gesture, much larger. So tools like that could also breed that understanding and community among partners. If it says, hey, here's how someone with this level of hearing loss understands this phrase. It might be why you need to speak more clearly, or, if they don't have their hearing aids in, here's some ways you can be more helpful. It creates more empathy by creating a tool that lets people, see through those eyes or hear through those ears.
So creating a series of content of helping people to better communicate with people with hearing difficulties would be another. And which of your buckets or tools would you put that into, if I'm to try and relate it back to your advice in the book?
So I think that would be a tool as the format. I think it's tough to say, I guess, what the focus would be. My guess is that it would be somewhat product focused in a way, because it would be showing probably the difference between with or without a product, with or without a particular service that we offer. Here's how that might change. So you could tie that into a product related conversation for sure.
Okay. And I'm even listening here and thinking, one of the things I've talked to this industry a lot about is comparing loss of vision with loss of hearing. Is being brave enough to say to anybody listening in right now, if you could create a metaphor between sight and hearing, and that you could show what it was like for somebody to have difficulty in hearing scenario and create it side by side with vision examples so people could see what blurry hearing would look like.
Yeah.
That might be a great way of people being able to understand at a very simple level. And one thing I've very, very rarely seen anybody do is to take the time to create content to explain high frequency loss or low frequency loss in a way that isn't overly scientific, in a way that a 12-year-old can get it.
Right. And yet we've all seen the graphics that say, this is what nearsightedness looks like. This is what farsightedness looks like, right? Especially if you're going through the process of having to get, your eyes checked and getting those kinds of glasses. So I think there's definitely room for really helpful content there that's educational in nature, but again, still ties back to a clear understanding. I also think there's an opportunity for really timely content. So I'm not in the hearing care space, but I did study American Sign Language. And so, I have some experience with the deaf community, and I have been personally really feeling my heart is going out to the folks who have relied historically on some level of lip reading to aid in their understanding of the conversations that they're in. And I know that it's a very frustrating time right now as everyone is wearing masks, that can make it very difficult for them to be understood and to understand. And so there's probably some really timely content around that conversation right now about whether it's for not your audience, to help them exercise patience and understanding for what those folks are going through, or for people who are facing that challenge, some tips for helping them communicate that.
Yeah, and we did tons with that last month as well. And we even did an outreach to physicians that was a masked image that's "We miss your smile." Chances are that many of your patients, and ran a referral piece to referral partners using that mask strategy that way around.
I've also seen a really cool, and one of the things we talk about in the book is an infographic. And if anyone has gone to any sort of healthcare environment, and I'm sure you're asking, these questions of your patients as well, there's the standard COVID questionnaire that you need to be asked before you can come in for an appointment or enter the facility. And someone made a really useful graphic that has visual. So rather than having to ask those questions, you can point to, okay, are you experiencing cough? And they can point to yes or no. So for folks who aren't able to maybe hear that, having a graphic, a piece of content they've created that allows them to have that interaction in a visual way has been very helpful for some offices that have a high number of hard of hearing patients.
So I'm going to throw you a problem, and I'm going to see what would happen when you put your brain towards this. One of the misconceptions in the majority of customers that are thinking about investing in hearing devices is that they believe that hearing aids are expensive. Mm-hmm. The disparity in product could be anywhere between, say, like $2,000 for a pair to $8,000 for a pair. Yet the big difference between those two scenarios is often the quantity and quality of the service that is attached towards that product proposition. Yet still the consumer thinks it's the price of the device that matters.
Right.
How would you use your content marketing brain to be able to better educate customers ahead of time that this isn't an apples for apples comparison? What would you do if that was the puzzle that you were posed from a consulting point of view?
So, I think I'd probably want to approach it in a couple ways, acknowledging that different consumers are going to react and be moved by different approaches. So I would definitely want to take a people-focused approach. So I would try to find a customer, a client, a past person we've worked with who had that same misconception and has now experienced some sort of transformation, so that we could use that personal story to explain, I didn't do this for 5 years because I thought X, Y, Z. And now that I've done it, here's all the benefits, right? As we talked about before, that really personal approach. So I would probably take that, and I would make sure to do several of them, making sure that I'm hitting on the different categories of individuals who are likely to have that misconception. So if it's young people, people of a certain age, we're going to use someone from that world. If it's people who are of a certain other level of ability in a certain geographic area,
so
knowing someone.
Thinking about this from a hearing care point of view, this is maybe a competitive user that made the mistake, went that way, and then has now found the light. It's somebody who was thinking about doing it for the first time and nearly made the mistake. It's the son, daughter, caregiver of a patient that is pleased that they made the smart decision and not the cheap decision. These are the kind of examples of these case studies we need people focused. Okay.
Yes. Definitely. And I, my recommendation is always just make sure that when you're doing people-focused content, you have a diversity of people in there. So whether that's different age groups, like you said, a different patient caregiver, those kinds of things to make sure you're reaching those different people. I would probably...
And on that as well, I'm just thinking about diversity in hearing care is that's being brave enough to say it's like not everybody is interested in better hearing their grandkids because not everybody has grandkids as well.
Right.
Like that level of diversity too. And it's not everybody wants to be seen to be old in this scenario. So have you got, a 45-year-old busy professional with hearing loss? Have you got, a happily married couple that are in their 80s? Have you got...
someone who loves classical music and wants to be able to continue to listen at home, right?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So this quantity of quality, diverse scenarios of people would be one way of saying that I did it the smart way and I'm pleased that I did. What else would we do with this?
Anytime we talk about misconceptions, myths, or misinformation, I always suggest a quiz. I think a quiz is a really good way to test someone's knowledge, and it also gives you the invitation of if and when they get something wrong because they do have a misconception or they believe one of these myths, that's your invitation to follow up with very specific content that helps correct that. So if it's, a cost estimator, right, and it says based on this, I think it will cost this much, here's the decisions I would make, and then being able to say, actually, that's not quite right, and here's why that decision it would give you something else. Here's some content or some briefs or, pamphlets, whatever it might be, serving them up content that corrects those misconceptions.
Okay. Yeah, quiz could be fun. I haven't seen that being done well yet in this space. And we could look at something there that talks about somebody's experience of being a hearing device wearer, talks about how many visits that they might foresee that they might need, what level of care and attention, what they want in warranties, what they need in terms of supplies, etc., and prove perhaps that they don't know. That might be a good result of the quiz, is to help them understand that, are they looking for, a fixed price piece of technology? Is it technology plus service? Are they looking for an unbundled or a hybrid type model? And help them realize what level of service they might want through that quiz. That could be fun to produce.
The one point with the quiz that I always just want to underscore is you never want to leave someone hanging. So if they finish this quiz and you're telling them you don't know anything, or you've got a big misconception, or there's a big gap in your knowledge, you don't just want the options to be like close the window and go about your life, right? So make sure whenever you're doing this kind of content, you've got clear next steps for them, whether that's additional content, schedule a consultation, have a call with us. Make sure that you're not leading them to a breakdown and then leaving them to fall.
Okay. What else might be content we could look at to try and knock down this price misconception? Because I know we've got some good ideas there, but it's a big thing in this industry here.
Of course.
We're working very hard for consumers to understand it's the provider they need and not the product. We're looking for the patient to feel like they're the hero of the journey, and not the product is the hero, not the provider. The provider is the guide and the product is a tool. That's what we're trying to be able to position more so. So what else could we produce to be able to support this kind of stuff?
So, one of the things that is always valuable, coming back to that people-focused content, is making sure you have really clear profiles that show the heart, the character, and the, sort of the mission and motivation of the people who are most important at the practice. So, really feeling like you can trust someone, that they understand you, that they're listening, that they have the experience and the right motivations can sometimes help overcome some of those fears and help, position that value. But in this one, I might need your help with a little bit, Phil, but I think that there's probably an opportunity for a data-based infographic here, since you're talking about these two states, this sort of like you might do this or you might do this, and there's sort of pros and cons. I can see some sort of matrix grid, with the check boxes of what you get with each, or maybe it's a slider based on if, these various variables, you're more likely to be on one side or the other. But I see some sort of visual comparison that could probably work really well to outline those different things.
So let's just check in with those that are listening in right now. How useful do you think it would be for you and your practice to have a side-by-side comparison as what somebody gets from working with you versus what they get with, say, Lively, and then producing that as a piece of content? What somebody gets from working with you versus buying hearing devices via Costco or via another online retailer, and us creating a number of us versus them type infographics. If you think that's a good idea, comment something in the chat, etc., because I'm catching that, thinking that would be useful. And John is saying, would love it. Like, there's some work to do, right, to be able to create where are their ticks and where are their crosses, but to create a very visual illustration that this isn't apples for apples, I think would be fabulous. There's another thing that I really liked about reading your book, which is something I never thought too much about from a content angle before, which is this area of history. And if we want to change the way that people feel about things, is if we make it was okay to think that this was true in the past, but it's not true today, then that allows us to be able to create a new normal. And we're in a window, right, where new normal is an easy thing to create.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if even telling the history of amplification and hearing devices and where we discovered the lesson that the provider was actually equally, if not more important than the device itself, would be a wonderful educational piece that was linked towards history. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what's really great about, and I think we're thinking of the same images. You remember with the giant cones coming from the ears, right? In the very old archival images. I think what's wonderful about this is it does have a lot of visual archive you could draw on. There's a lot of great imagery to be able to pull in and talk about, that background, that history. And it does give you a chance to, I would probably recommend doing something like this on a timeline. So showing like, here's where those major innovations happened, or those shifts in thinking would probably make for a really visual point, and also help underscore, and we're here now, we're not here anymore. And so here, this is what the right path forward is for you, likely.
I like that from a fun way of being able to, instead of saying we've been doing this for 27 years, is even documenting that timeline with some personality to it. That if you have photography or imagery of you performing these services 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago with imagery of products, etc., is to be able to tell this experience story through visuals as opposed to another way.
I'm seeing some comments come in here with regards to the comparison thing. So I want us to dig into that, because I want to make sure that we can make this really, really useful. So Manny makes the observation that, maybe a comparison couldn't be trusted, more of a testimonial. I hear you 100%. Of course, we're always going to say that we're better than a competitor, right? So I think one of the really important things when it comes to creating a comparison like that is actually including opportunities, however surface level, where the other person gets a check mark and you don't. Now, that doesn't mean we're saying they're better at something, but when we talk about, if this is what you want, if you want this thing, we don't do that. That's not our thing. They can do that for you. Now, that may still be ultimately a proof point for you, but the fact that you're being open and it's not, we've all seen those where it's like no check marks for the competitor and all check marks for us. I mean, that's just not very helpful for anyone. So as long as you're being honest and you're, including those pros and cons on both sides, I think that it can be a little bit more trusted. And it makes a good point. This people-focused content we talked about before, you can nest in there. So if you're looking to hear from someone who had this experience, or someone who thinks that this particular line item is most important consideration, here's Kate's story and see how she had this experience. So being able to link those together, again, to surface relevant content, I think is a really good way to go. There's a couple comments in here too about having a tool for patients to understand their specific needs in terms of services. So tools are definitely a good option here, and a quiz may be a good way. Have them answer those questions, and then you can sort of funnel them toward what might be the best fit. There are some other questions here about, the comparisons. Once we specifically compare to another store, chain, or website, concerned we may be reinforcing that comparison instead of separating ourselves further. So yeah, I think there's something to be done here in terms of, we're not just sort of, as we said with the quiz, we're not just sort of dropping the infographic and then calling it a day, that there is a more nuanced conversation. And I also think there's room to not be as specific, and Phil, you know the space better than I do. Maybe there are certain brands we want to call out specifically, but oftentimes these comparisons can work really well when they're almost vague. So you can say, big box versus online retailer without having to call out anyone specifically.
I think there's timing as well to do this. So say, for example, a local competitor is doing loud and proud, ugly, crass advertising that is full of misconceptions. You almost have a responsibility to produce a piece of content to answer that piece of noise. I think there's a brand called Listen Lively that have entered this space that don't have any hearing care background, that are really, think of it as Smile Direct, but for hearing aids.
Yep.
It's direct towards consumer, heavy ad spend, team of marketers, New York City office, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on Facebook ads, etc. And their marketing is good content marketing, etc. But they are anti-private pay. They're almost saying that everything that our Inner Circle members do that is in addition is unnecessary. We can do the same as that for less. Here, I feel like we need to almost newsjack their marketing by having a counter argument to their argument that says, look, I understand what you're saying, but you've got to heck out a lot of bias towards this. Why don't we at least tell our side of the story? And this might not be loud and proud on your website, but buried in a decent blog article, shared in some social pieces with some video content around it. Right. When somebody goes peeling back layers, they find it.
And I think that's something that is maybe helpful just to even set up this conversation and for the rest of your content thinking is not every piece of content you create is all purpose. It's not for everyone. It's not on the front page of your website. A lot of the content you create will be for very specific scenarios where someone has a certain challenge or a certain objection, or it's for a certain type of client or customer. So they don't all have to be loud and proud. You don't have to worry about not everyone is going to relate to this. The folks who will engage with it, and the folks who won't will scroll right past because it's not speaking to them, and that's okay.
Okay. And this is a lot of work, right? So where do you prioritize? Because what you prove so eloquently in your book and through your work, that actually creating content ideas is not actually that hard. People always say, I struggle for ideas. I think where the challenge often comes is how do you prioritize those ideas? So what is your take on how to go about that?
So that's one of the side effects I have heard as feedback is like, well, I read the book and I had, all these ideas and now I don't have enough time to make them. So don't be down on yourself. One of the wonderful things is being able to choose and prioritize what's going to make the biggest impact for you. I can't say for any individual business which specific content pieces or ideas will be most impactful. My recommendation is to look at the data of what's worked for you well in the past, or inversely what hasn't worked, and then to try to work toward that. So we want to make sure it's tied into our goals here. So, if historically our testimonials aren't converting, people aren't loving it, those pages are poorly trafficked, or they come back to us with more questions even after we share them, that's a good indication that there's room to improve there, and maybe we should start there. And again, I think testimonials, shifting toward more narrative storytelling in the testimonial area is a really easy place to start. So that's a recommendation. If you're finding that you're getting the same objections or the same questions over and over in your sales process, that's a good indication that some sales enablement content could help save man hours and overcome some of those common objections and questions. So, if your team has the same email questions or the same questions and objections coming in and needing to be corrected, start there because that's going to make the biggest impact soonest. And
from
that
a
will
productivity point of view.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. So like this price question, if that's like a big thing, if that's the number one, time and time again, we're getting the same objection, the same concern, then I would see that as a sign that our efforts are probably best spent here versus, updating the fluffy descriptions of all of our products. That's probably not going to move the needle for us, but we have this big open question we need to address first.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in today's market that we all need to be able to answer the how much question in some way, shape, or form on our online assets, and we're working to be able to do that. Another big strategic play that we are putting through with all our accounts right now is that instead of having product pages that are littered with features and benefits, we're trying to use your focus of opinion and inviting more of our professional experts that are the inner circle members on here is to have comment, thought, and opinion about why that product is the right thing for that set of circumstances. Yes. If you were tasked with the ability of being able to create opinion pieces about products based on the fact that you had an expert that was driving a business, what would you say would be the ingredients that would go into creating good quality product-based pieces that allow the expert's opinion to shine and actually to create evergreen content that stands the test of time too?
I think that kind of content on a product page is so valuable and really makes a massive difference, at least in my experience with some of my clients and how people convert and engage. So one of the things that we've seen work really well on product pages is video content. I know that's not always in everyone's budget. It's not always feasible for them, but oftentimes it's really, really compelling to see either an actual customer or a qualified expert just have casual, not overproduced, not scripted, just have a conversation. Here's what I love about this, or, here's me putting it on for the first time, or, just have that very natural human conversation with potential customers who are on that page has been the easiest way for us to make the biggest change on those pages. The other thing, and I'm not sure exactly how this would fit in, but maybe there's an option here, is we've found that oftentimes our product photos are really sterile and don't help people visualize them efficiently as part of their life, part of their routine. So having customer photos, or they could be like false customer photos, we more lifestyle in nature, but rehearsed and set up, can make a big difference, right? It's the difference between seeing a shirt on a hanger and seeing it on a person. And so sometimes being able to create some of that lifestyle imagery that shows, perhaps it's the device with different hair colors or different skin tones, or, showing it in different scenarios that might make it a little bit easier to picture how it could connect to you in your life. So those two are where I'd probably prioritize, opinion-based video that's really, really authentic and, sort of straight to camera, just being real. And then lifestyle, either user submitted or simulated user submitted lifestyle and real use case photos.
And I'm just thinking about how to do those videos effortlessly and easily, right? We provide a lot of fulfillment to our Inner Circle members in terms of trying to get things done. And we've learned that if you systemize process, you can actually achieve an outcome as opposed to anything else. I'm thinking about some of the stuff that you're saying about video for these product pieces. If we put a process to this that says when the product comes out of the box, that you shoot a quick video of, here's me taking out the box, here's what I like about it, plastic feels good, boom, 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 and you just commentate towards that. And that's part one of video.
Yep.
Part two of video is, I've got Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith, etc., that is trialing this product for the first time today, and that you just kind of shoot that short intro. Then you do a quick Q&A with that patient following the initial fit. Then you do a quick straight to camera of your opinion of it during the fitting process. And then you revisit that patient second, third, fourth fit about how well it worked for them and longevity. If you just recorded those 5-6 segments of short video, they could provide that to us. We could crop that together and then produce a plethora of content from that. That would mean that every product page would be truly unique in the rest of the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in, I'm a big believer in systems. I mean, that's what the whole book's about. That's like my whole focus, right? How can we make things easy? And so making it almost like a menu, check boxes, here are the types of segments we need for videos like this. And the other thing that may be really smart to help you all help one another is to create almost B-roll options that can be used by one another. So if you're taking it out of the box, and maybe you're not in a particular frame, maybe we've just got the hand here sort of holding it around. Someone who maybe isn't able to do that could use that particular piece, right? You can all help one another by following these kinds of things and working together. So that may be something that helps with sharing resources as well, because I know that sometimes video can feel intimidating if it's not your space.
So let's hit you in a different angle. Why is this need to think like a journalist, this need to create content, why is it not only a good idea, but bordering on essential?
I think that it's never been harder for businesses to stand out right now. I think your example talking about with Lively is the exact situation that's happening in every industry for every purchase that consumers are making, right? We've never had access to more content. We've never had more choices about where our buying happens. And so those brands that really want to stand out are going to be those that build a relationship with their consumers. They're going to be people who put value first, who put the consumers first, who are open and transparent. And the best way to communicate all of those things is through content. I mean, people aren't going to come looking for you and look for a reason to change their mind and choose you instead. It's really up to you to be proactive and creating the content that tells them we're someone you can trust, we're someone you should work with, we have the expertise you need, and we're going to help you solve those problems that you're facing right now. And so I think that having a wealth of content, creating as much content as you can to answer those objections, to help overcome those challenges is really the only way to stand out and sort of be the signal through the noise.
And what happens if you don't?
They're going to find someone else's infographic. They're going to take someone else's quiz. They're going to, read someone else's company history timeline and end up working with them. And I think that's just the reality that we're in. We think about, many of you, even just on an individual basis, my guess is you may be watching less live TV and you're gravitating towards tools like Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus is all the rage right now, right? Because they're giving you the things that you need and they're reaching you in the ways that you want to be reached. They're letting you explore content in the ways you want to explore it. And so we're making those decisions. Who's giving us the content I want in the way that I want and need it? And so we need to be that answer. If we're not giving our customers the content that they need, we're not answering their questions, someone else will.
Okay. So it is a point like, if you don't do this, you risk being obsolete. You risk that every 50-50 gateway decision goes in the opposite direction because somebody was just fundamentally more useful.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's really what it comes down to. You know, I think we're seeing that even more in this current age with COVID, this instructional content. I don't know, did we talk about this earlier? The idea of process-focused content and instructional content?
Nope. Hit us up with that.
I want to underscore it now because it's really important, especially now. All of us are trapped at home, and the data, I'm so excited about this data. There's data that shows that starting in early March and sustaining until now, people have continued to search for terms like tutorial, how to, DIY, instructions. We are hungry for process-focused content right now because all the things that we would normally hire out or go somewhere for or, you know, buy, we're now having to make and do ourselves and improvise, right? And that's going to continue to be the case for quite some time until normal, you know, in its various states and degrees returns to us. And so, you know, this kind of really helpful content, if you are a person who can help someone with a problem now, then as soon as they are able to continue working with you in a different way, you are already someone who has proven your value, who has engaged them, who has provided something that they needed. You're building that relationship to a point where they feel an increased amount of trust to help you out. And so, you know, that's where you want to be right now, is creating that kind of content that's providing
what
value.
That would look like for hearing care, right? Is the biggest thing that people need to understand whether they're going to treat hearing loss is a hearing test. And yes, there are tools out there that allow you to test remotely, but very few of them provide the level of accuracy that is required in order for people to be able to treat it. But I'm wondering if that we could be even more playful with this, of creating how to, like you have Layla, we have Kensington and Violet here and the kids, and there's a lot of advice out there as to how to baby-proof your home. And the steps you need to go through so that you can live more comfortably at home and baby doesn't do anything dangerous. I'm wondering if you take that same metaphor and say, how do you prepare your home and your environment for somebody who's having difficulty with hearing loss? Then what you might do is you might provide just the right piece of content for someone who's 3 steps back from a purchase, but then sees you as the trusted advisor that they then do step towards 3 months, 6 months, 9 months from now, once they realize they probably need to treat this.
Yes, and it's important to remember that not all processes are physical, right? Our brain goes toward fixing, making, grabbing, baby-proofing, right? But think about, there's someone who needs to have a conversation with a loved one about the fact that they believe they need help with hearing care. How can we help them have that conversation? How can we give them prompts to have that conversation to start that process? How do you talk to your own loved ones about hearing care? How do you, I mean, there's decisions, thought processes, conversations, right? There's other processes that are a little less physical that people need to be getting through. And, you know, if I go and find this guide you've given us for how to talk to my loved one about the fact that I think they need to have their hearing tested, you know, when they finally agree, when this conversation goes magnificently well because I had your wonderful guide, then who am I going to turn to for the next step? I'm going to go back to what's worked.
So challenge to everybody listening, we are making next month Hearing Health Awareness Month in the towns and cities that all our Inner Circle members operate in. And it would be great if that piece of content found itself as part of Hearing Health Awareness Month. So if you can provide, you know, your unique flavor on how to be able to communicate with a loved one who you feel might be having difficulty with hearing, on things that you can take responsibility for, things that you can communicate with them, etc. We can turn these into infographics, blog articles, social posts, etc., and create really useful content. So yeah, thank you for that idea. I think that's a winner. What else do I want to get from Melanie's brain today while we have you under the spotlight for the world of hearing care? And
if all of you have questions, drop them in. We'll answer as many as we can.
I was going to get to that in a second. We still have some time for that. What are the mistakes that people make about content?
There's a couple key ones. I think one of the things I hope we won't have in this group is sometimes content becomes a function of our ego and not our strategy. And so I find this less often in these kinds of spaces because these are helping industries. Our mission is oriented toward helping folks, but occasionally someone somewhere in the organization gets the bright idea that this being the star of the YouTube series is going to be their path to fame and fortune. And the content doesn't ultimately serve the audience or doesn't ultimately serve the business goals, and it becomes really someone's ego project. So we definitely want to avoid that. The other thing is sort of a two-pronged or a spectrum of a problem where instead of focusing on the different types of content to create, we either put all of our attention onto one specific thing. We put all our eggs into an annual report that we create, or we only create content for Facebook or something like that. We put all of our eggs in one basket. Or on the other side, we've spread ourselves so thin, just peppering little bits of content at random, random acts of content all over the place, that it just doesn't work strategically for us. So we don't want to be hyper-focused on one specific thing, and we don't want to spread ourselves so thin we don't have an effect. So we want to find that middle ground where we're trying different things, we're testing, we're optimizing, and we're doing more of what works.
Another question I have for you is I'm guessing everybody listening in right now is sold on the idea that producing great content is a good idea, and they're full of ideas, etc. Yeah, how do you shift your brain a little more to be able to think in terms of content? What is the mindset shift that you need to go through to actually create the prompts that this is something we should do next, as opposed to something that just happened?
Yeah. So remember I said earlier that our brains go to the physical, like that's what we're most drawn to because it makes the most sense. It's easy to conceptualize. What I find is that when we all think about content, particularly if our upbringing or our background or study is not content, we think of the physical. So we think of content as a video or a blog post, or we're thinking of the form that it takes. And we're not thinking about what the true essence of it is. What is the story? What's the angle? What are we trying? What's the message, right? So if you can, I would like to encourage you all to flip that switch. Instead of thinking format first, really think, what's the story I want to tell? What am I trying to help my audience achieve? Really ask sort of the less tangible question, and then have the follow-on be, now what's the best way to bring that to life? Because if I know I want to help people understand that, we know that having a conversation with your loved one is hard, but it's sometimes an important first step. Okay, that's the message. What's the best way to bring that to life? Well, why don't we make a guide that's going to help them have that conversation so that there's no barrier anymore? Okay, would a guide be most easy if it were written, right? Because it's a conversation guide, or maybe now photos probably wouldn't work. It helps you see how to bring it to life when you have a clear idea of that focus first. So I really encourage trying to think that way. It may be easier to think about the form, but think about the focus. What do you want to achieve with that piece of content? And then ask, what's the best way to bring it to life?
I like that a lot. And if we come back to that whole safety, convenience, community piece, that if you're trying to be able to champion those things, take the safety thing, is every time that something is being cleaned down again, etc., what can you do to create data out of that? Is that if what you've done is you've gone through 3.5 liters of cleaning fluid this week, etc., that's a data point that could be shared, right? Is if you've had a professional service come in every morning or every Saturday, etc., photographing the other local business that is coming and supporting your hygiene standards is a great way of being able to actually create content. If you're looking to be able to prove convenience, what can you do to be able to say that our average wait time on a telephone call is less than 35 seconds, or step-by-step guide to help somebody get set up to use Zoom for a new consultation, etc.
Right.
That we can use these as the guiding lights, and actually the content ideas become huge. And our Inner Circle members are pretty darn fortunate in that more often than not, all they need is the idea and maybe one marketing asset, like a photograph or a statistic or a detail, and our team will bring that to life and blow it up into multiple pieces. But you still need to have that thinking brain that says, I'm thinking in terms of content. So I like that. It's not a blog article or a video or a photograph or a data sheet, etc. It's what is the most important thing to communicate right now. And then if you can collect the assets for that, you can produce the tools that are then required on from there.
And I think it's really great for the Inner Circle folks to know that that's the best way to have the team working for you and get you what you need. Is sometimes we get that instinct to say, well, I think I need a video, get me a video, right? And sometimes what you end up with, it may be a great video, but it's not, since you weren't clear on your goal, it's not a video that's going to help you do what you want to do. And so really thinking, focus first. What's the message? What's the story? What are we trying to achieve here? The team's going to be much better able to find the formats that are going to best serve you in achieving that goal.
So here on Summer Camp, we have the benefit of an intimate audience with Melanie Deziel, who is without question one of the world's leading experts on the creation of content and content marketing. My guess is that you have a question or two that you might want to float across. So put questions in the chat box, use the Q&A piece as well. Let's see what we can do to make sure your specific questions are answered in and around Melanie's area of expertise. And while those questions are coming in, Melanie, why don't you just share with us a little bit more about your backstory and how did you get to a point of being able to be this kind of Jedi master on content stuff?
Yeah, so I studied journalism. I thought I was going to be a journalist and that was going to be my lot in life. And I wasn't able to find that kind of job. And so I realized that the skills that I had learned as a journalist were really applicable in the marketing world. You know, like I talked about earlier, I think I was really blessed that I got to start off at the Huffington Post early on in the digital journalism was just sort of coming of age, and HuffPost was at the forefront of that. And I built their team called HuffPost Partner Studio that did all of their brand content. So I was one of their first hires there, built that team. The New York Times came knocking and brought me over as their first editor of brand content. So I built out T-Brand Studio, which is now a 150-person team that creates content for all the brand partners of the New York Times. So got to work with amazing brands there, Netflix, all these Google, IBM, I mean, dream brands, right? Like the Fortune 10, like the big ones, right? So that was a really wonderful experience. And I got to do it at magazines as well. So I was at Time Incorporated, where I worked across 35 US magazines to build out their content strategy, both digital and in print. So what's great about that is I was still close to the journalism publications and organizations that I loved, but I got the privilege of working with such a diversity of brands, everything from a local diamond retailer, a sports startup, all the way up to, Google and these major, the Olympics, these major brands. And so it's given me a really diverse perspective of what works in all these different places. What are the commonalities, no matter what industry you're in or who your audience is, where's the overlap and what's the same for all of us?
Nice. Question in from Melanie, which is, what are your thoughts on measuring success of each piece of content?
So I know we talked about how you have to understand that goal. What's the purpose of that content piece before you start? The reason that is so important is that's really how you decide how to evaluate it. So, that quote where they say, if you evaluate a fish based on its ability to fly, it'll live its whole life thinking it, it's a common thing. So the same thing is true with our content, right? If we create a fantastic testimonial that we want to be seen by as many people as possible, and then we evaluate it based on how many people booked a consultation after viewing that piece only, we're not doing ourselves, our content, or our audience a service in that way. So making sure the way you're evaluating it is tied to its purpose. There's basically 3 buckets I want you to think of. We have awareness content, where the goal of that content is we want to just get it in front of people. We want it to be seen. And with content like that, we measure things like views, clicks, impressions, things that indicate eyeballs were on this piece, plays on your video, for example. So awareness. The second one would be your engagement content. So that's content where we want someone to take an action on that content itself. Maybe we want them to comment, we want them to like, we want them to share, right? We want them to do something that has to do with that content. So that's where, we'd evaluate it based on those metrics, the engagement, the likes, comments, replies, etc. And then we have our conversion-based content. So, we have awareness, engagement, and then conversion. That's where we're really going for some engagement that happens off of the content. So that would be the download, the sign up, the schedule, the book, the buy, all those calls to action that involve them leaving the content and doing something else. So those are really the sort of the 3 buckets I would think about your content. Is it awareness? Is it for engagement? Is it for conversion? Sometimes it's a combination, right? These things are all interrelated. They must be aware to be engaged to convert. So, it's not always exclusive, but that can help guide your thinking as to, should we evaluate it as awareness, as engagement, or as conversion-based content?
No, I like that a lot, because even simple things like, if you're going to produce a piece of content that sits between a patient booking a consultation and arriving at the consultation, what would you put its metrics around? And it may well be the success metrics on that is reduced no-show rate. Mm-hmm. It may well be that the success metrics are shortened period of time in the consultation that creates some productivity back for you in the running of the practice, because you can now get through what you need to get through in 32 minutes as opposed to 45 minutes because of this pre-work, etc. So there are so many things that you can use content for, and it isn't always, did it make the phone ring? Did we sell hearing devices? It's
right.
Did it deliver on its pre-designed purpose? And we're always refining, right? So you're never going to run out of things to be able to work on. It's not a right or wrong. It's here's where we are right now. Is it making it better or is it making it worse? And if it's making it better, it's adding to. And content is huge. I mean, how many pages do you have of content, say, just within your own website?
I don't even know. I don't even know the answer, honestly. There's too many. I like, one of the things I really like doing is creating fun little pages, sometimes even for just a single use. So, you know, here's an example. There's for some reason, when people Google me, they tend to Google the word age. They want to know how old I am. A lady's never supposed to tell her age, right? But I created a landing page on my website with my exact age down to the second, because I know exactly the minute that I was born, right? It's how many people see it? Almost none. And if they do, I haven't seen them convert.
Yeah, I need to do 2 pages here for this as well. Is people Google Phil M. Jones wife and Phil M. Jones net worth. So those are the 2 that I probably need.
You might as well get that traffic for yourself, right? So that's why tools like Answer the Public, it's really important to know what people are searching for, because sometimes creating a single page or a blog post that answers a question like that, I mean, that's someone who is maybe looking for you, right?
Yeah, and there's some traffic come from it. And I like the idea of focusing on content for specific purposes. And I give example from my world is, I have some videos that sit as part of my sales process from a speaking point of view. And I get lots of people saying, oh, those probably could get you more views on those videos. And the success of those videos might well be 15 views in a year would be me crushing it. So the fact that the video is hosted on Vimeo and only has 200 and something views on it is not an issue. I'm not looking to try and be a YouTube sensation. I need it to convince a meeting planner to pick me and not the next person. That could result in hundreds of dollars worth of extra, hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional revenue. So it's creating content with purpose. And actually this stuff that isn't in the face of everybody is actually the entire layer of content that we're trying to say is important to build, right? It's not homepage of website stuff. It's not your primary info pages. It's the stuff that when people are looking, they find what they were looking for and they find it from you.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, obviously you want that house in order. You want a clean and an effective homepage and an FAQ page and whatever else your main pillars are. But none of our customers are generic customers, right? They're specific customers and they have specific needs, specific challenges, specific questions. And we need to be able to answer those specific challenges, questions, etc. And so having that content on the fly, it works as a sales enablement tool. So when you have a customer that comes in with specific concerns, here's 3 blog posts that are going to help you overcome those concerns. Here's 3 things that are, you know, custom made for someone just like you. That's much more effective than saying, check out our blog. I'm sure there's something there for you, right? So having this stuff and having it organized in a way that you can find it and share it with just the right person can make such a big difference.
Okay. I'm going to encourage many of you to be able to come forward with some more questions. I know that you're not as shy as that you're showing that you are right now. And Ollie and Clive and anybody from our team here, if you've got questions for Melanie, then punch those into the chat or the Q&A too, as we want to make sure that those come across. While those questions are coming in, Melanie, a thing that I want to quiz you on is what about people who have team, right? Is there are lots of people here that employ 3 people, 7 people, 15 people, etc. How do you utilize your team within their existing constraints and job roles to become content producers or create ideas for content for you?
I mean, I think usually what happens when we have these conversations is people realize I've got a lot more ideas than maybe I thought, and they get kind of excited to create some of this stuff. But if you're having a barrier, one thing that can work really well is pairing up with someone who has whatever the skill set is that maybe is less exciting to you. So, you know, someone like me, I'm not into video editing. That's not my skill set. It would take me forever. It wouldn't look good. So if I was excited about a video idea, I would need to pair myself with someone who could bring that skill to the table. So that's one thing I always encourage people to ask. You know, if there's a part of the process you're excited about, but maybe you can't get all the way there, find someone on the team or in the organization or a partner like Orange and Gray who can come in and fulfill that other part of it. Because I think sometimes it's those objections that get in the way of our creating. Well, I'm not a video editor. I'm not a podcast person. You know, we kind of let those tiny tactical things get in the way of sharing our story. So finding someone who can solve for that speed bump. It's not a wall. It's just a little speed bump. So just find someone who can help you do that.
Yeah, we've seen things work well also where, say, for example, somebody in the team is just the product geek. And, you know, they love all things product. So you make them the product champion and then let them choose their content format of choice to be able to talk about product. And then maybe somebody who's front desk that is used to answering all of those questions on a regular basis, that you just task them with a simple activity to say, for the next 14 days, can you just document in a Google document, spreadsheet, scrap of paper, what are all the questions that you're being asked inbound on phone calls from patients, and then run 5-bar gates that, like, if anything is recurring, and then this becomes the hub of content. So often you can spread the wealth, right, of the workload by getting other people in your team to be able to get it done. What else do we have question-wise for you? Everybody's shy today, Melanie. I think you must have overwhelmed them. I'm guessing that's.
I'm sorry. It's a lot. I know.
You're not that sorry. Not that sorry. Manny's asking here as well. Even though I offer better hearing, I'm interested in aging in place. Would you consider this good blogging, even though it's not about hearing?
Okay, run that by me one more time.
So I think what Manny's asking is that he has an interest and a passion towards people who are aging in place, as opposed to going into a home, as opposed to doing any of those other things.
Right.
And it's not directly related towards hearing, but it sits quite close alongside it. Is this a good idea to be able to create blog content, info content around that in its entirety?
I think the question that's most important is it related for your audience? If your audience feels like that's ancillary related content, then absolutely, right? Anything that we're bringing in, if that's going to bring in new people who are potential customers for you, then that's amazing. If it's going to be, you know, part of a conversation that you can have with them, you know, I'm sure you've had this conversation many times here, you know, with other guests as well, is our audience is human. You know, we think of them as targets or as avatars, but they're people and they have other interests and other thoughts. You know, it's important to have those related conversations as well.
And I think there's a chance in that as well to be able to add your own unique flavor of things, right? Our mutual friend Jay Bear in Talk Triggers talks about how people can easily identify themselves as something different. That if you are the real estate agent who loves roses, then you are easily identifiable as a real estate agent because you've got this one other thing that goes with you. So Manny, if you're the hearing care specialist who gives a damn about aging in place, then anybody who's thinking about aging in place is going to see you as their hearing care specialist of choice. So
That's right.
I think everybody can play with that. Your yes and that exists in the things that you care about. So I know we've got members of our team that care about people with hearing loss in third world countries, and they do a lot of work that way around to be able to provide support. That could become, you know, great content archive, or for people who are financially limited that way around, or people who have homeless situations, etc. There's so much that can be done there.
This is one of the things they teach you in journalism school too, is that oftentimes if you have someone you're interviewing who's like a tough interview, they don't want to share anything, is look for environmental cues about who they are as a person. Ask them, there's a photo of the dog over there. Is that a spaniel? I've got a spaniel too. And it kind of like, it creates more of a human connection. So by creating that kind of support content, and again, the people focused content about your staff and the people, you know, your values as an individual, as an organization, helps create those opportunities for connection.
And I think what's key there as well, when I listen to Manny's question, is he says that I'm interested in aging in place. That's what's going to give you the continuity for there to be a through line of content pieces on this. And making sure that you are choosing things that you genuinely have an interest or a passion towards.
Yeah.
Other questions for you, Melanie, here in the chat. We've got Clive asking, is there a good specific balance to strike between the 3 identified categories in percentage terms, i.e. awareness, engagement, conversion?
I'm hesitant to give a one-size-fits-all trio here. I think that it's going to depend a lot on what stage of your business you're in and the individual. So again, as we said, you know, every piece of content you create isn't going to be seen by every member of your audience. So you want that balance to be right for the individual. So you want to have a good wealth of each type to be able to send, you know, and use the way that you want to. I think, you know, if you have only conversion-based content, you're going to have people feeling like you're, you know, just asking for the conversion too much. You haven't earned enough equity to make that ask. I think if you have only awareness kind of content, you're not going to get the conversions you want to see. So it does need to be, you know, somewhat equitable. You need a little bit of each, but I think it also depends on where your customers are coming from. If they've never heard of you before, then you need more awareness, right? If these are folks in your community who are familiar, you've been there for many years, they know who you are, then you could probably start a little further down that funnel. I think you want to make sure there's a little bit of each, and then turn up the ones where it feels like, well, we don't have enough awareness, so we need to do a little more of that right now.
Yeah, which problem are you trying to solve, right? That's what you're asking. Okay. Question from Jana, which I think is great. Jana's asking, what are the most unique ways you found to get content out there? Not the usual social media channels, etc.
Yeah, I think we turn to the same things over and over again. We turn to the big social channels. We put stuff on our website. I think that there are some smaller social networks that can have a lot of power with specific industries, specific types of audience members. So consider whether there's smaller, sort of below the radar places. So, I guess it depends on your exact customer base. I don't want to say something, potentially irrelevant or ignorant, but, a lot of people will think, okay, I need to get an article featured in the New York Times. Well, maybe the AARP magazine is a much better fit for your target audience. It may be much smaller, but it's much more targeted to a specific group that you may be trying to reach. So look for local publications as a way to partner and get your content out. Look for those smaller social networks, whether it's a forum or a membership site or some sort of small community that may have a higher index of your audience. And then don't forget that there are some traditional non-digital ways to get things out there. I've seen brands create coloring books. I've seen brands create, origami mailers that they send home. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do to stand out and reach that's not just sharing something on social. So think about some of those more physical opportunities for interaction, especially if you're in a local market.
I'm going to add one more to that too as well, that is who is sharing it is often more important than where it's being shared.
Yep.
And what you all have is that you all have social influence within your marketplace. Now, I would much rather see a great infographic shared by your local dentist to all the dentist's patients about the impact of hearing loss, knowing that would likely bring more traffic back to you than you sharing it yourself. So I would always be looking for saying, who can I get to share what I'm looking to be shared so it doesn't come from me, so it sounds like it's somebody else's idea. And that could be a patient sharing something in a local Facebook group or a local community group instead of you sharing it. Is what can you do to get somebody else to share the thing you want shared, so it's sounding like it's third party from the get-go.
Yeah.
Melanie, where can people find out more about you? Where can they plug into more than what you have available?
So you can learn more about me and my team and all that we do at storyfuel.co. So it's storyfuel.co. So you'll learn more about the book there. If you have questions about that or you want to get your hands on one, you can learn about the coaching, masterminds, all the fun stuff that we do to help folks with their content.
And we've got a little something for you as well, is accompanying the Story Fuel and Content Fuel Framework book is a workbook, right? You've got a workbook that people can work through that helps them come up with hundreds of different exercises, etc. What do you typically charge for that workbook?
It is $12.95.
A whole $12.95. See, we are prepared to buy any of you Inner Circle members a copy of that workbook under one simple condition. Is if you send Ollie a photograph of you holding Melanie's book, then what we will do is we will return that with a copy of Melanie's workbook so that you can work through to come up with some more content ideas. You can do it with your team, etc., that way around as well. So we're happy to buy as many of those workbooks from Melanie as you provide photographs of you with the Content Fuel book. So happy to send pic and video if needed. Jana's going to do it.
Overachieving, over-delivering. That's excellent.
That's Jana all over. She likes to be a consistent overachiever. That's her MO. Okay, Melanie, anything more that you want to share? Any parting remarks? Any kind of last rally cries of how people can be better content marketers as a result of your existence?
Just know that the world needs your stories, that there are stories to tell. Don't let yourself be convinced that there's nothing left to say or you're not the folks to say it. People need our stories. So start mining. Those gems are hidden there, and the team at Orange and Gray will help you find them.
We certainly will do. We'll certainly help you get them out there as well. So Melanie, thank you for coming on board. Those that are listening in right now, please do Melanie a huge favor and just share some thoughts in the comments. If they want to be able to continue the conversation with you, where's the best social platform for them to do that? Or if they want to take screen grabs of this right now and share it out to social, who should they tag to make sure that gets connected with?
Well, depending on the network of your fancy, I might be M Deziel, I might be Melanie Deziel. It's tough to know. You got to get those handles early, right? But I am the only Melanie Deziel. So if you look for me on social, whatever platform is your preference, you will find me. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm all over the place wherever you need me. Yeah, you could definitely do that. And I spend a lot of time on Twitter. So if you're a Twitter person as well, if that's your favorite place to hang out, I'm M Deziel. So it's MDEZIEL. You'll find me on Twitter.
Awesome. And I'm reading in the comments here that people are feeling inspired and overwhelmed. I think that was the intention. And yeah, multiple pages of notes is good to start creating great content, and know that we're here to help you make it real. All you need is the idea. What I like about even Melanie's work is that it is the story fuel thing. If you can give us some of the fuel, we can go and build it and turn it into reality. So Melanie Deziel, thank you for coming on board. I will let you get back to your beautiful baby Layla, and look forward to connecting again with you at some point in the near future. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for letting me share my story.
You bet. I will see you soon. Well, thank you all for joining us, and I'll speak to you guys all soon. Melanie, take care, be well. Thank you everyone else for joining us. This has been the second edition of our summer camp, and I'll see you again in a month's time with our third guest. Thank you, Melanie. See you soon.
Bye.